Okie doke. Starting the stream. And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Papiden. Co-host James McVeigh could not join us tonight. He's out canvassing for Michelle Williamson. Anyway, this is August 1st, 2019. We're doing a Hangout review of... thank you, RJ, by the way, for the free advertisement there. We have merch, guys. Anyway, so tonight we're doing a debate review. We've got Doug, Drew, and RJ. Haley will hopefully be joining us. She's having some technical issues. But
it's because she moved.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. She's got a new setup now. That always sucks. Anyway, so what did you guys think about the debates? We should break it down into like night one, night two. Any thoughts on night one? Night two's fresh from my head, obviously, because we just watched that yesterday. But night one, what do we think about that? That was the night with Bernie and Morin and all of them.
Well, I think that maybe to start, my overarching opinion about the debates was that the format was awful. I mean,
Tell me more.
The fact that they tried to limit everyone to like 15 to 30 second responses essentially throughout meant you had a ton of moderator voiceover saying, thank you, or your time is up, or your time is almost up. It also doesn't lend itself to real complex answers about real complex problems. And it seems particularly ill-suited when you have 10 people on the stage each night. Maybe a more rapid fire sort of back and forth would work when you have 5 or 6 people. And they're already kind of established on where they stand on the major issues. But here we're hearing from some people like Bullock, who hadn't even been there before, attempting to answer questions in 15 or 30 seconds. It was a farce, and I don't think that a whole lot came out of this other than we have September to look forward to, when we're hoping to be down to 10 debaters, which should be a much cleaner format.
Is it supposed to be two? Okay, first of all, I do generally agree with you. Is it supposed to be 2 more nights of debating, but like 5 people each instead of 10, or is it going to be like one night of 10 people?
I know that it's 2 nights.
It depends on how many people are still in the race for the next set in September.
Gotcha.
I think if it's 10 or less, it'll be 1 debate. If it's more, it'll be 2 nights.
Gotcha. And we'll get into, I guess, sort of what our hopes are for the next round of debates. But RJ, I do generally agree with you that the format, they were trying too hard to get away from like the one-word answer, raise your hand, because there's no substance to that. And they all kind of made a point of that actually during the debates. But like on the other hand, the limit of time, you're right, they couldn't really get into it, and there's too many big personalities on a stage to comfortably get them all in. Imagine if each one of us was like a public figure and we're all trying to get our words out, like, we lost Doug. Well, see, not all. See, this would be a much better debate stage right here. Oh, and we got Doug back. Never mind. Anyway, so like, it's really difficult, and we got him on camera. What's going on, Doug?
Yeah, I just had to log out and log back in.
Oh, cool. Well, I'm glad that works.
Yeah.
Good to see you, man. All right, so.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Haley.
So yeah,
I finally got on.
Yeah. So I don't know how it could have been done better. I just think there's too many chiefs, overall. I don't know if there's a better way to do it.
So I think speaking to one way it could be improved, and RJ shared an article earlier this week that I agreed with, I liked, is that I think CNN was looking for controversy. They were looking for sound bites. They were looking for people trying to take other people down, and you saw that a lot in this night than you saw in the first night. To me, as kind of a big thesis, I got to see some people's vision for what they want and what they propose on night 1, and I got that from none of the candidates on night 2. And it's because they spent a large amount of time just arguing on specific things from the past for different candidates.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. One thing, and I'm sorry to keep distracting and talking shop and stuff. Do you have headphones that you can put in?
I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
And if you can't, that's okay. If everyone else has it, then we should be okay. Because otherwise this echo effect will be picked up on the recording and it'll sound like crap. But anyway, No, he's absolutely right. In the difference between night one and night two, night one was more of a discussion of like big ideas and what direction do we want our nominee to take, the country in essentially if they become elected, with regards to immigration, healthcare, criminal justice reform, like all those big topics. And night two was just about like digging at each other over each other's records. And that was sort of, and we'll get into night two because it seems like the juicier story kind of thing. But what do you guys think about like who did the best and who did the worst on night one? Anybody?
That would be you, RJ, probably.
He's unmuting himself. You're still muted. You're still muted, RJ.
Yes, I did watch night one, and I think that the easy winner is Warren. Warren has been on the meteoric rise that it actually has some substance behind it. I think that a lot of people doubted Harris after the first debate, and you saw that in her polling numbers, in her numbers on Predicted, and ultimately in the night two debate and the follow-up to it. I think that Harris got a lot of passes on the first debate because she went after Biden so vociferously, and people ignored the fact that she wasn't able to answer a lot of the questions, that she was halting. Like forensically, she didn't do great, and that was kind of surprising from a prosecutor, I think. But as far as night one goes, Warren got out there. She looked confident. She seemed spirited. She has actual ideas that she's thought about and put in front of people who do policy for a living in those areas. She has substantive ideas, and I think she's the easy winner. I think that Bernie did pretty well too. I think that the two of them played off of each other very well because the setup that Doug was sort of alluding to was let's pit the left wing against the moderates in the party. And so she and Sanders kind of coalesced around each other. And I thought there was a nice moment at the very end after they did all of their outros where she and Bernie kind of like half embraced on the stage and both looked very happy. I think that Bernie needs moments like that because he has mostly just been hanging on to his 2016 sort of the vibe that he had in 2016. Yeah. I think that Pete Buttigieg probably had the best debate performance, but I think that he's hurt by the fact that there are still 20 people in the race. So you have this splintering effect on, all of the 20 people have some level of support. And as they start to drop out, they're going to have to figure out who they're going to support instead of their, one
who they're
or
going
two
to coalesce around. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think the Buttigieg has a lot of opportunity to grow. Obviously, he's shown that he has the fundraising chops. He was the biggest fundraiser in quarter two for 2019. But, or on the Democrat side, obviously, Trump isn't running against anyone and had $100 million.
Yeah, he's far and away above everybody right now.
Yeah, but if you added up all of the Democrats' fundraising, they made a little bit more than he did. But that doesn't matter. I think other than that, night one, all of the candidates are starting to run into a problem. And that's that there's a brick wall of momentum where if you don't pick up on something, if you're not starting to speak to people in some real way, then you're lost in the shuffle. Like there is no path for you to go up anymore. And I think a lot of people squandered opportunities there on the first night. And really, Warren wins easily. Bernie did well enough, and Buttigieg probably had the best performance, and Michaels just because he has fundraising.
I guess I can agree with that aspect of it. But with regards to Pete, I kind of found him a little bit middling because there was this great contest between the center and the progressive left was sort of what was front and center in night one, at least in my mind. And Pete's kind of like not really in either, and he kind of tries to ride that fence, and he just seemed like, I don't know, he wasn't really in that debate as much for me. That was what my takeaway was.
And I hear you, but I think that the fact that he got to say what he's been saying in stump speeches lately, which is if we go hard left, Trump and his supporters are going to call us socialists.
Yeah.
I
thought that was a great line.
He's been saying it for weeks now.
That was a really
but
good line.
yeah, if we come out as in the center or we take conservative positions, Trump and his supporters are going to call us socialists. And then the answer there is not just let's pick the hardest left position. It's let's figure out what the right answer is, stand behind it, and explain it to people. And I think that's where he's starting to distinguish himself, because whether or not I agree with every single policy point he's trying to make, at least he has policy points. And the more that the field narrows, the more amplification to those views he's going to get, especially because he raised $25 million in the second quarter.
No, I get you. I definitely agree. I'll let somebody else talk, but I definitely agree that when he said that, like whether or not it's a far left position or we're doing something conservative, they're still going to call it socialism, because that's what they just say that. They just clown horn socialism at everything. So just pick something that you believe in and defend it. And I think that was his moment of night one. So somebody else.
I'll go for a little bit.
Go ahead.
So I think Warren had a really good night. I think she got her message across and she communicated effectively. I think she addressed challenges that were presented to her very well as well. I think Sanders had a better night than he had the previous night. To me, Sanders still just has kind of the old angry man yelling syndrome. I actually listened to a more recent podcast from Pod Save America with him, where they interviewed him. He comes off really intelligently, really calmly, but I think he has this trick that he refers to economic disparity as Wall Street, right? So he has this thing that exists out there that people can get mad at when it's just income or economic disparity between people, and he still uses that as a technique. I think it speaks to people or certain groups of people. Some people it doesn't speak to. It doesn't speak to me super well. I think Pete had a good night, but not as good as his first debate. I think one of Pete's major strengths is he talks honestly, and I think he can connect people to that way. He doesn't hide behind buzzwords or revert back to his platform. What he does is he answers the question directly and with sincerity. He actually did a worse job of answering questions directly this past night. So I think he had a little bit of a worse performance relative to his first night, but it was still pretty good. I think one person who did better relative to expectations is Williamson. As crazy as
Oh
that
my
may
God,
sound.
right?
Please.
I thought she did great the second night. I mean, I disagree with that. I mean, I'm not a fan of her by any means, but yeah,
Well,
she.
I subtitled
Totally
this.
different
I
from the
subtitled
first
this
debate.
Hangout, by the way. I subtitled it "Psychic Darkness." Anyway,
But-
go ahead.
Yeah, but I think, relative to expectation, right? So she's not someone who's polling particularly well, but I think she speaks to truths to many people. When she says what she says, my reaction is she's not wrong. And for many people, it resonates with that because she's not talking about policy. Now, I think she's completely wrong when she's just blowing off people's policy descriptions and solutions to real world problems, right? And I don't. She's not my candidate of choice, but
Sure.
I do think she really resonates with people. I think she has a strong position on reparations, which really resonates with certain people as well. That she speaks some historical truth. So I think she's able to capture a lot of that, and she's calling out what Trump does, and I think she calls it out pretty well. So I think she did pretty well relative to expectations. And then I think O'Rourke had a good night. I think he had the night he should have had in the first debate, but what he needed to do was have a good night and then have a standout night, and he went from having a bad night to a good night, and that's as RJ said, he's just, there's nothing that differentiates him from anyone else. His compelling argument is that he is polling best in terms of Texas. You can easily just translate that into he needs to run for Senate in Texas and campaign for the candidate to help them win Texas. That's not a compelling argument for why he should be the nominee.
Yeah, for real.
No, I think that you have a good point about Williamson in terms of relative to expectations, because they were zero, right? And she says a lot of weird stuff about psychic energy, and it's just odd. But I totally agree with you. Her moment on reparations was really awesome. And I thought that she described that better in the stupid soundbite format of the CNN debates than I've seen a politician do since reparations have kind of reappeared on the national stage. I thought that was, I mean, I would call it impressive. I disagree with you on Beto, though. WAPO called him anonymous in the first debate, lackluster second quarter of fundraising, falling poll numbers, anonymous at the second debate. The magic hasn't rematerialized for him. I mean, I think he's just treading water at this point, probably just getting the name recognition bump that may help him get to, like you said, a Senate seat, perhaps in 2022.
Right. And when I said good, I didn't mean like exceptionally good. I kind of meant more so relative to the first debate. And like he didn't have any blunders or anything like that. It just he had kind of maybe where we might expect him, or maybe slightly below. We kind of think of him more as an exciting candidate, and he's not an exciting person, at least on these debate stages.
One of the people that I was kind of disappointed with, I expected her to go hard and like have a standout performance this round, just because it's one she needs to. Is Amy? How do you pronounce her last name?
Klobuchar.
Yeah. I mean, she's polling terribly, but like she has, I think that she has the chops to actually like put forth something of merit and value. And the entire time she just seemed overly nervous, and that's just not, I don't know. Yeah, I was disappointed in how she came out. Not that like she's my candidate of choice or anything, but I had the expectation that she's going to go hard in the paint this time, and she did not. So,
but the sad thing about that, Haley, is that she promised that she was going to, right?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that she needed to, and I expected her to, based off of her
she came out. She came out in the days before the debate and said, I'm not going to be timid this time. I'm going to take the gloves off. And the only thing that changed that I saw from the first debate, other than the forensic things that you've noticed, is that she decided that her strategy would be to tell stories about how much people hate her and how happy that makes her. I thought that was a weird way to go.
I know that RJ disagrees with me on this, but for the past two debates, I've actually thought Gillibrand has done well in, like, she delivers the message, and I don't know. She's also not polling well, but she's having standout moments, I think, in these debates. And that's my 2 cents on that. I mean, I have others.
Drew,
but...
you got anything
on Gillibrand?
Gillibrand, just night one generally.
Like she even. I mean, I didn't see night one, so that's why I'm sort of staying quiet on it. But
you got some good commentary running on it, though, so you have that.
So as to Gillibrand, her message at one point was, "I can talk to white female suburbanites." It was like, I can talk to the Karens and make them talk to the manager. And that, I mean, that last part is RJ, but still, like it still is, I think, a very valid.
Well, no, I thought your comment was well put. You're like, "Hi, I'm Karen. I can talk to the other Karens."
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I mean, it's just it just seemed. Maybe this isn't the thing for her. I don't know. I think there are a lot of good candidates and a lot of bad candidates. She didn't impress me, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, I think we could talk about day 2 at this point, right?
Yeah.
One of the things.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that I noticed as a difference is that y'all kind of touched on is Warren and Sanders did not go after each other on day 1. Day 1, I don't think that CNN did a good job on moderating these debates. But day 1, I did feel as if all of these candidates it didn't turn into some sort of celebrity death match. And I thought that is a good format for the debate. When you contrast it with day 2, like, it was already being pitted as the Harris versus Biden showdown, and everyone was going to tack on trying to take down one or the other.
Well,
and One of the people I thought did well on night 2, I think Castro. He's surprising me.
Yeah.
I like how he's coming across. I don't know. He seems good. And also, while I don't think he has any kind of real shot, I thought that Cory Booker, in his attempts to take down Biden, which I don't think is a good format. I think he landed some really solid punches, though.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think night
So-
2 was mostly, if you could summarize it, it was an old man gets beat up.
Well,
Like,
no,
it's-
night 2 was basically like Julius Caesar with everybody stabbing at Biden.
Also,
I mean,
Well, I mean, Harris was also stabbed. So.
Oh no,
Yeah.
Harris got a haymaker straight to the face.
yeah,
by I think
Tulsi
it's
Gabbard.
yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody did their research, and that was not very good for her. And then she like totally juked on the answer to that too. And then afterwards, like at the end when they were interviewing her, she just came across as kind of arrogant and, well, they only took a shot at me because I was the popular kid, basically. And I thought that was kind of not a good look for her.
Something I heard on because I listen to other podcasts as well. NPR does a podcast, and I guess their little press people get to go and I guess observe like at these debates and stuff like that, and then they come on and talk about it. So they were physically there or knew people that were, and apparently there's something called a spin room, I guess, where all the media folks hang out during like these big productions, and it is just known and understood by all the people there that if a candidate or sort of like the surrogates of a candidate comes down into the spin room to try and talk to the journalist after a debate, that's not a good sign. And she was out there in kind of full force trying to sort of set the record straight on everything she said so that she that she was getting out the messaging she wanted it to, to spin it in her way. Biden himself was not there, but a lot of Biden's people were out there, apparently, according to these folks on that free advertising for the NPR podcast. That they did like post midnight recordings of both the debates, and I listened to both of those earlier today, and it was pretty interesting, their take, given the amount of damage control that those two candidates were trying to do after the debate. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to cut off. I mean, I think that we should talk about night 2. I just wanted to throw 2 more things into night 1.
Sure.
Delaney got eviscerated on stage.
Oh, yeah.
If you read the McSweeney's roundup, which is hilarious,
I didn't get
he
a
gets
chance to, but
he gets both of his arms cut off and then is cut in half by Elizabeth Warren, who draws a longsword from behind her podium. But he looked like someone who had walked into the wrong room. I mean, he was talking about things that appeared to be the polar opposite of what the other people on stage were talking about. I mean, Delaney, the term rhino, right? Republican name only.
yeah,
Everyone knows what that is. And I don't think that Dino has ever really caught on.
yeah.
He looked like someone who was a Republican who was like, I am a Democrat nominee for president, believe me.
Yeah.
And then just went off on stuff that nobody really cares about on that stage. I also wanted to point out the Bullock, the Montana governor.
Mm-hmm.
It was his first debate. He did not qualify for the first round, so he was only in the second round, and also came off as someone who was like, I can get Republican voters because I am, 66% Republican. So
Like it's not going to win you any primaries.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you there. Who was the guy? Was it the guy from Colorado? Which one was that?
Oh my God, the Mr. Mackey from South Park.
Dude,
Yeah.
Bennett.
That's no
Michael Bennett.
No, it's not Bennett. It was. Oh, I can't remember who it was now. But he sounds like Troy McClure from The Simpsons. Like, you know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
Oh God.
No.
Is it Bullock? I'm not really sure. No, it's the guy who opened a brewery and went on about it.
Yeah, that's the Colorado guy.
That is the Colorado guy. Okay. Well, he sounds like Troy McClure to me. 'Cause I was like listening and not watching, and I was like, it sounds exactly like that dude. But anyway, yeah, like so much out of touch. But I think to put a cap on night one, maybe if no one else has anything, Warren had a really good moment where she kind of jumped in. I think it was after Bullock, saying, who's going to come out here and run, on telling people what we can't do. Like she got, with the whole like CNN aspect of it and trying to get sound bites and, like a fiery, a reality TV kind of thing. That like she picked up a really good moment right there. It was a really good soundbite, and so did Sanders when I can't remember who it was talking about the bill that he wrote and saying, "Oh, it doesn't do that." It was Delaney. I think that's who the guy I was thinking of, and he's like, I wrote the damn thing right there, and it's like you can't really.
That's Hickenlooper. That's Hickenlooper.
Oh yeah.
That's night 2. Night 1, Bennett is from Colorado. Hickenlooper is from night 2, and he also got stabbed several times.
No, because that was Sanders rebutted him immediately when he was saying.
Yeah,
Hickenlooper
was one.
Hickenlooper is also from Colorado, but Bennett is a senator from Colorado.
That's what's got me confused. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Makes more sense now.
Bennett is the one that sounds like Mr. Mackey from South Park.
Yeah.
Hickenlooper is the one that sounds like Troy McClure from The Simpsons, which I did not know until right now.
A few other things that I noticed is, one, you saw CNN trying to get some sound bites as to a tax increase for Medicare for All. When the argument is that there might be a tax increase, but the people who are paying those taxes would ultimately pay less relative to their medical costs now. And you saw just Sanders and Warren just refusing to give that soundbite, which was great, right? They stood their ground.
Yeah.
You also saw Sanders call out CNN, which had advertising that he alleged was from pharmaceutical companies.
It was, yeah. I saw
right?
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have him illustrating part of the problem of that goes with this message. And I also think Delaney served as a really good foil to Warren, particularly at the end where they talked about her wealth tax, which she was saying, I believe, was 2% over 50 million annually. And I think that it's a higher percent at a higher cutoff level. But they gave the audience an illustration of, hey, here's this guy who's unrelatable, who has a net worth of 65 million. Let's tax him on part of his income to pay for my solution, which I think is an audience member who does not have that kind of money and who values some of the things that Warren is talking about. It gives us an illustration of how she can make this possible. So kind of incidentally, we got a good example of what Warren was talking about by this foil who I don't think most of the viewing audience really related to. So I think that was strong for her.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That the best debaters don't just, here is my talking point, I'm going to rail on about it, but say, I can play some of my idea off of what else is happening out there. And Warren really did that well. And I totally agree with you about the idea that CNN was attempting to get the tax soundbite. And it was just completely vapid. Like, well,
obvious too.
Oh, but like Senator Warren, would you agree that if someone makes an extra $10,000 a year, that they will pay more in tax in that fiscal year? And it's like, yes, duh. They will pay literally more tax. They'll also have more money in their pocket. They will be happier with a $10,000 raise than without. I mean, it's simple math, but they were trying to thread this needle.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly, and say, well, you just want to raise taxes, don't you? It's like, no. People will pay more in tax, but pay less overall because they won't be paying insurance companies as middlemen to their health care. And I couldn't believe they stayed on that. Like, I thought maybe they'd ask it once, and they asked it like 6 times. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I have a stupid question. And, I mean, just so I'm making sure that I'm understanding this. So last night, everyone knows my husband isn't from America, and he just asked this basic question that Medicare for all, that's universal health care, right? It's one and the same, more or less. It's that seniors get Medicare and it covers 80% of their medical costs, and we want it to go for all people now. And so this whole concept of Medicare for all is just sort of a phrase that's an umbrella phrase that sort of encompasses everyone's different idea of how they're going to pay for everyone getting some kind of basic amount of universal health care, right?
Well, Haley, I think as a lawyer, you have to look at what the actual law says.
I know, but that was like how I explained it last night. But I want to make sure that like it. But like whenever he asked me, and I started saying that, I was like, wait, but do I actually know? Like, am I just like buying into soundbite crap?
There's different iterations of it that are basically trying to get you there, kind of different ways, and that's one of the things that they're essentially pettifogging and trying to split hairs over. I mean, we all want something better than what we're getting right now, and it's just trying to try and show what daylight exists between the candidates there. I don't think that's an unworthy debate, and I think that was really the bigger focus of night one, and that was okay. I think I was okay with that it didn't get too ridiculous, but these kinds of things, it tends to break down. Like there's some minute difference in would you be able to keep your health insurance, or do you have to give it up and just public option only, and that's socialism / Venezuela, like, and being ridiculous with each other. Like, that didn't really happen so much. It could have gone there. I'm sure the right is saying that regardless of which way. To go back to Mayor Pete's point, like, they're going to call either one socialism. So let's just pick the one that we think is going to work the best for everybody and defend it.
But Haley, I don't, you're asking, is it synonymous with universal health care? And you'd have to ask, what does universal health care mean too, right? Like,
well, of course, but I'm saying that, like, as a general idea, it's it's just this concept of healthcare for the general population.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's single payer.
I mean, I don't know. You kind of threw me with asking, like, exactly what's, like, why are people, like, what is this? Is it, like, one policy? And I was like, no, but it's this one phrase that everyone's using to kind of define it.
It's basically, it's just another way of saying that we're treating healthcare as a human right in the United States. And whether or not that's accessible through private and public options, or just a public option, is what the debate is about. That's my understanding. If I'm not answering that right, let me know.
No, I think you are. It's just interesting, just because I mean, and Matthias is from Sweden. It's like, I mean, they also have private healthcare. They also have private insurance. They also have, and he was like, so what are, like, what is this debate actually about? And it was sort of like an existential moment where I'm like, what is it about?
Yeah. And that's what the different platforms were about. Is that they called it something like, a system that's like, what do they call it, like Medicare Part C or something like that, where it's like supplemented by private insurance as well, that you could still go out and get private insurance, but there is, like I said, that public option, versus people are like, no, screw it. So long as you are incentivizing profit through healthcare, the system's always going to be broken. That's closer to like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Like, that's more the train they're on.
Yeah.
Versus some other people who have more moderate views. And then Michelle Williamson, I think it was probably her worst moment, being like, oh no, some people may be scared about that, she says in her weird flighty voice. And that was her worst moment of the whole night, I think. But anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, she totally punted on
what's
that.
funny about that is we were watching night one, and my wife looked at me and was like, what is her accent? And I was like, I think it's a speech impediment. And she looks it up, and she looks it up.
She's from Houston.
Yeah, she goes, oh no, she's just from Texas. And I was like, okay.
I was gonna say like Valium. I don't know. Like,
I've heard 1950s Mid Atlantic.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
It's just like
transatlantic.
It's just breathy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just pulling soft shell crabs right out of the chest.
So let's touch on one last thing, maybe, and then really officially move on to night two. The thing about reparations, because that is radioactive, anywhere even slightly right of center, right? That is you are done by even suggesting it, right? And there was multiple, to my recollection, full-throated endorsements. And one of the strongest by Michelle Williamson, and to thunderous applause. And I was talking with my girlfriend Janie about it at the time. I was like, I don't know how that would play overall politically, whether or not that's really a feasible thing. But at the same time, they included in the question that 73% of African Americans support reparations of some kind. So are you really going to get on that stage and be like, hell no, we're not going to do reparations? Like, how do you thread that particular needle, versus maybe what do you really believe in there? I'm sure Williamson just went with her heart on that one, but I don't know about the others.
I think like with Williamson, whether or not, however you feel as a politician or a citizen about like the, if like actually doing reparations, she was able to say succinctly, like there has clearly been harm because of like the systemic racism, generations of slavery. And, I think RJ actually touched on this early on in the debate, and I thought that it was, she succintly was able to state something that I do agree with. And she also, did mention how to pay for it, which I, knowing the very little that I know about Williamson, I actually don't know if that would work. But I do think that she touched on, just something that most Americans can recognize is there is a real harm, there is a real damage, that there's been an injury, and sure, there should be some form of retribution for that injury that's been ascribed to people of a certain race that have been here.
I guess my concern about it is the level of enhanced grievance that would be born out of that. But I don't really know if I have an answer. But I have concerns. I'll say that.
I mean, we're all white, and I feel like every single time, like there's a certain amount of like internalized individualism. Whenever you hear that, you're like, wait, but so I think that there's like, but I do, and the way that she explained it, I thought it was well done. No, that was clearly her best moment.
She did have she had a very strong moment. She came out very strong there. I don't disagree. The other thing
I think that Doug had something to say about this.
Go ahead, Doug.
I'm specifically calling him out.
Sure. So, like, I think she can say more aggressive things in terms of advocating for a cash payout when she's not going to be the candidate. I think that would be political suicide to say that in a general election. I think a lot of the threading the needle that you're talking about is having social policy that tries to address systemic racism. So trying to reform the criminal justice system, try to improve education, things like that. And I think that's where you're just going to see the candidates fall.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, she's a candidate that's able to say something like that.
Yeah.
And something else I got to give her, like, kind of, because I know she talks in a lot of kooky language that I don't get on board with. But the thing about, and I joked about earlier about the psychic darkness or whatever, I think maybe there's linguistic limitations on describing like the general sense of animus in the country now. But I think she was trying to describe that's maybe I'm projecting, but it seems like she was describing it in those terms of psychic darkness. And if that's what she was doing, I think she's not wrong. And that was another big moment for her. Again, she's not going to be the candidate. She's there for notoriety, hopefully not a cabinet position. But there for notoriety, maybe to be a thought leader, maybe to pull the platform a little closer to her direction. I don't think those things are necessarily terrible, but again, I don't think anybody here thinks she's a serious candidate. I'm getting a lot of feedback from somebody.
So, another person who, he's getting more serious, but is able to say, have a message, put forth a platform is Yang. We haven't talked about Yang yet.
Yang wasn't he night 2?
He was night 2.
He was night 2.
Two.
Let's move on to night 2. If you want to lead in with Yang, go ahead.
Well, I mean,
Haley definitely wants to lead on Yang.
Yeah. No, I don't. I mean,
Secure the bag.
And I mean, I don't think that he's going to be the candidate. He's getting momentum though, and I do think he did exponentially better in the second round of debates. He's already qualified for the third, and he doesn't. In contrasting with someone like Warren, who is able to have a message, read it, and still present it as a pushback to someone else, Yang always is going to push whatever question that he's being presented back to this $1,000 a month basic income.
Yep.
And I personally find that to be kind of like a cheap argument tactic, and not really organic. But he surprised me in, he just seemed a lot better. He didn't seem shocked to be it didn't seem like he woke up and realized he was on the Democratic debate stage like he did the first debate round. He seemed personable, smart, and he also, of course everyone's rehearsed, but he whenever he talked about his wife, I thought that was something that resonated well with me. Whenever he said, he has 2 children and his wife is a stay-at-home mother and she gets no income for what she does, but clearly she does something of value for the home and everything, and she's clearly a worthwhile citizen and all of this. I thought that was well put. But yeah, I mean, he's built I don't think he's top tier, but I'm surprised by how well he's doing.
Yeah,
he's polling somewhere just as high as Buttigieg.
Well, it's one of the things that he said actually in his closing remarks, that he had, I guess after the first one or whatever, it was polling 4th in something, or in terms of his notoriety after the first debate. But and yet all anyone can talk about is the fact that he wasn't wearing a tie during, and how in the reality show remark, and how America, this is why we elected a reality show president. I mean, he was completely on point there, and into the earlier points about his wife staying at home, raising a kid, how that is invaluable to society, and yet that contribution in our society monetarily is worth 0, and how much of a problem with that. He was exactly on point. Again, I would be astounded if he was be the candidate. He's not going to be the nominee.
Who was the guy who was saying that he's gonna have a chief manufacturing officer or something? Who was that guy? I mean,
I don't recall hearing that.
It was Ryan, I think.
Yeah, Tim Ryan.
You don't recall hearing it because nobody cares about Ryan. Anyway, sorry.
I mean, of course, everyone's immediately thinking oh, he wants to call Elon, but maybe he wants to call Yang.
I wouldn't mind seeing Yang in an administration position, maybe cabinet position, because I think he says right things. He's just not going to be the nominee. And I don't think it's a particularly strong chance against Donald Trump, which is what this is really all about. But he's not wrong about a lot of the things he says. A lot of the problems he's diagnosing and pointing out about what's happening with jobs. And he talked about this too when we were talking about immigration. That immigrants keep getting scapegoated for job loss, and the reality is it's the march of technology that is the reason why these jobs are going away and not coming back. So just stop with the dog whistle bullshit. He had some really good moments there in the debate, I thought.
I have a lot of thoughts about him.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I think coming from both nights, there's a question of what is the candidate's message? And I think you get that message from Sanders and Warren, that I think they are against high concentrations of economic power in the government, working for those concentrations of economic power. I think you get kind of a message from Buttigieg. I mean, his message is general generational change. He didn't really go too much into that this past night. I think Yang has a clear message of he supports a version of UBI, and I think Castro kind of has a message of immigration reform. And everybody else, I don't know what they're about, because they didn't articulate that very well to me, just as a viewer. So I think he did that well. as Haley's referencing, like every time they give him a question, he spun it back to his dividend freedom tax or whatever, or his freedom dividend, I think.
Don't call it a tax.
Yeah, which is a little bit of a parlor trick, but he's staying on message, which is great for him. However, that doesn't address a lot of the social ills that we're facing, and it doesn't address all of the responsibilities of president. So he's kind of shortchanging what ultimately he has to present to the public in terms of being right for the job. Surprisingly, as Haley mentioned, he is polling well. I like to look at the website Predict It, which seems kind of like a betting website of who might be the potential candidate. He's currently number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
He's like on the same with Buttigieg, yeah.
Yeah, he's a little bit below Buttigieg and a little bit above Booker. I think he also has a big appeal to people who don't identify with either party or libertarians, which there's kind of a strange argument with how it might appeal to libertarians because you're functionally taxing and paying out. But I think there's appeal to that. I think people who like people from the business community really like Yang as well. I think there's an appeal to that. All that being said, I do think there's a lot of people who just who are fans of him that I think he's like this weird internet darling. It feels like he's kind of a meme, and that is translated into some support and success. And that drives me up a wall. But
Yeah.
you know, he's a smart guy. He's kind of a traditional Democratic platform. But I think his agenda is he's trying to address a really important problem that we're going to be facing probably in the next 5 to 10 years, and no one else is talking about it. But it's a train coming down the tracks at us, and he's at least bringing attention to it. And I think there's value to that.
Yeah. He did an interview for this podcast newsletter business that I follow called Skim. And, you know, what the basic takeaway that I got from it was, you know, his big thing is he wants to clearly sell this message of automation is coming. You know, we need to start revamping like how we as a society think. And the one thing, if I don't win the presidency, because every single candidate has a certain, you know, major issue that they're pushing, and the hope is that, you know, you get so much support for your X position that whoever gets elected has to actually acknowledge it, give it value, push for, work with you to push for policy, because clearly it's something that the general populace is interested in and likes and, you know, wants, and to adopt it, more or less. And I mean, you've seen that with the Democrats, with Bernie in 2016 saying the phrase Medicare for all, and now that is, you know, sort of that's a common thing now among that party. And so I think that like that is probably his ultimate goal, and so I think that he's doing a good job on that.
Yeah, I like the idea that to what both Doug and Haley were saying here is Yang is speaking to something that is absolutely going to happen in the future, right? A lot of low-level jobs will be created. And a lot of the people in those low-level jobs are not going to have anywhere else to go. So Yang's point is sort of, David, you touched on this as well. We need to start paying people just for being there, just for being around, because we're taking away opportunities from them. So the idea then becomes, how do you fund that? Probably from the places that have automated the jobs out of existence.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really powerful message. I just think that it's very real, and I think that, Doug, you're right that it is coming down the line, but to some people that just sounds like, you know, we're going to have flying cars by the year 2000, and it might be a little bit too like futurism. Isaac Asimov in Boy's Life, for people to really grasp onto, but it's definitely something that's a real concern.
I mean,
One really good
go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, one really good example that I gave is like we have a large number of people who drive trucks for a living, particularly in certain states, and we will eventually have automatic cars, and maybe that's soon, maybe that's 20 years from now, but you're just displacing those people, and it's hard to say where they're going to go. I think he makes a compelling argument, and I don't know this for sure. I think I've loosely heard it, that he proposes that we fund this through a tax on the people who are benefiting from these technology gains, right? So if a trucking company, the people who make the trucks get a lot of money from saving all this effort from people having to drive trucks. You would utilize their profits to be able to pay everyone else for it. That'd be the idea.
But isn't that like hyper socialism or something? Like that's. I mean, isn't that going to be the counter? Yeah.
Right. So you're like heavily taxing the means of production here, right?
Yeah.
You're saying you have the capital to make this happen. We are going to tax you and redistribute that to everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's probably. I don't think socialism's easy to define, but that's probably.
It's something. Yeah, it's something else. It's like socialism squared or something. I'm not really sure. Like, yeah. I mean, he's
The
not,
Asian guy who likes math can't explain it though. He won't explain it that way.
No, he wouldn't explain it that way. But I get, like, I understand, like, his vision behind it, but just knowing, like, how short-sighted we are, like, not just as a country, but, like, as a species, like, we won't realize if this is the right thing to do. I'm not saying it necessarily is. If this is the right thing to do, we won't realize it until we are in deep shit, like, and experiencing the effects of being in deep shit, like, because if we're just a little bit removed from it, this is why people keep voting against their economic interests, for centuries now, right? That if you can be removed enough from the consequences so that you can't correlate, correctly with what you did, with whatever the bad thing that's a result of that, then there's really nothing to stop you from keep doing it. That's been a problem in politics since politics. And so with something like this, it's just, he's not wrong, but it's just too far out for people to be able to get with. It's one of these things where we'll look back at what he said and say, oh yeah, he was right.
Yeah, totally.
Hindsight being.
I mean, I just equate it with one of those, the thing that Elon Musk is always saying, like, AI is coming for us. And I love Elon. He has one of the best Twitters. But, sometimes I'm just like, all right, voodoo robot guys, you're already trying to make our brains sync with technology. Are you really that afraid of AI? But, I don't know. It's, Yang's an interesting character for sure. And I too followed Predicted, and I just, every time he surges, I buy a bunch of Yang Nos, so clearly I
Haley and I update each other on the Yang No.
Anytime that Yang is surging, it's like, all right.
Get you some Yang. No, yeah, no, like I said, yeah, I like Yang. He's an interesting guy to listen to. He will not be.
One of the things that he said about immigration that I actually thought was one of Biden's biggest flops was that thing about PhDs.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's because that is a conservative talking point, right? And I've heard that many. The meritocracy of who we only want to let in people into this country who are check those kinds of boxes as what makes our country better. Someone who has a PhD or someone who's already a millionaire or something like that, which is, another way of saying, we don't want poor brown people here. I know that anyway, and that's what I read into that. Some people consider that unfair. I don't think it is. But Biden, he just spouted that off, and he got his ass tore up, didn't he? On this one, it's
such bull crap as a person who is going through the immigration process with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, not from a shithole country MIT grad right now. Uh-huh. And you know what? That's not the frickin' issue. So,
under Biden,
I just
what he was expressing. But which I disagree with Biden still, and I also understand your frustrations, Haley, because this administration is all about just keep everybody out because
it's so hard to immigrate to America. I can show you some documents, and they make it sound like Matthias is freaking from Mars. But that's something that I really, and I understand is personal for me. But with Castro, and I don't know, just the whole system needs heavy reform because. You can make it we don't want to let brown people in, and sure, that is exactly what they're drafting for. But at the end of the day, what it's really it. However, you're going to draft it in a certain way, you're going to keep out talent. If it's really, really hard to immigrate to America, you're going to keep out a lot of talent. And China, Canada, Canada especially is like really hopping on the tech visas. And I mean, whenever you balance the time and like going through that whole entire process, the amount of money, and I mean, like we've been rejected twice during our application process, and it's the entire system needs reform. And whenever
Now-
we're talking about like these kind of future issues that we're going to face, the fact that we're going to be missing out on a clear amount of talent just because it is freaking hard to immigrate here. As a lawyer who, going through the process, there's been forms that I've had to read like 18 times just because I'm like, I don't know if I have to pay this check or not based off of how it's worded.
No, and I mean, I'm going to disagree with you there. I think that reform of the immigration system is dangerous simply because I don't see it going in the direction that I would like to see it go. I think that if there is reform to the immigration system, it's going to be one of retraction. It's going to be one that makes it more difficult for people to come in. And I just was
That's
thinking,
what you want to see?
no, I don't want to see that. I think that's what's going to happen. I think that's if there were to be a reform, that's the direction the reform would go. I don't think that there's some utopian end where we get like really good and open immigration to the sorts of people that we want here, and that also allows for their families to come in, that also protects refugees and asylees.
So I agree with you in that certain sense, but you also have to understand that it's about an environment. Matthias worked in Mexico for 2 years following his graduation. We have a lot of friends here who are Mexican citizens who came here on visas and their wives and stuff. They went through the immigration process to get a green card and started it before, some of them before Matthias met me. And the difference in time that it takes to get a green card versus someone on a corporate sponsorship in 2016 versus someone on a spousal visa in 2018 is vastly different. And when you have cuts to the system, when regardless of the laws in place, the environment right now is let no one in, don't fund the process. We see the crisis being manufactured at the border and everything. Even if we have these same exact laws that are in place 2 years ago, it is a quicker, more mainstream process just because it wasn't extremely gutted. It wasn't something that elected officials who are running these departments, who are running these budgets and making these decisions aren't like, well, my base is going to like it if I cut funding to the immigration department and stuff like that. And it's still the same laws. And so, no, I don't expect a utopia or anything. And whenever I say reform, I mean, basic.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. I would imagine that we're probably on the same page in terms of what we would like to see. I just think that if there is reform, either from an agency perspective, which is the most likely way, or from a legal perspective, legislative, that it's going to be to make it more difficult. And that's why
under the current administration, sure. But
not even just
but what under Julian Castro? Like, what about under a lot of these candidates? You really think it would still get worse?
I think that no, I don't think that it would get worse under those candidates. I think that whenever you leave things up to agencies and you allow the executive to control all of the agency decisions, and you leave it up to the courts to determine under the APA whether or not the agency decisions are correct or not, you're playing a dangerous game of dice. I think that, for example, the lottery system that allows people in who might not have otherwise been able to come into America.
Mm-hmm.
I went to law school with a man who I just found his story so incredibly brave and inspiring. But he came here on a lottery ticket, basically. He won the American immigration lottery. And he was going through law school at the same rate that I was at night school, working during the day. And that's the game that you play with immigration. You don't just bring in doctors because you can't. There's competition for doctors. If you let enough people in, you're going to get an aggregate. I don't want to say rising of the tide because I don't like that phrase, but you end up saying, okay, you know what? We're going to let a lot of people in. And some of those people are going to be ordinary citizens. They're not necessarily going to give or detract from the everyday life of Americans. But some of them are going to be doctors and lawyers and people who are really important to our society. And I think that when we look at the founding ideals of America and when we look at things like the Statue of Liberty, that we're supposed to be lifting that lamp beside the golden door, not shutting it in people's faces, which is absolutely what we're doing under this administration, which is, to your point, David, the danger of leaving it up to agency decision.
Gotcha. Well, that is a good point.
I wanna hop in on something real quick.
Yeah.
So
We should also
one
bring it back
critique.
to the debate. So, the debate itself and the candidates and their performance.
Well,
So, no, it's a good
yeah.
topic. It really is. I just don't want to get too far off a track because we're already like an hour in.
But I want to hear
So-
what Doug has to say.
But yes,
Yeah,
please
just-
go ahead, Doug.
So going back to the debate, and like your questioning illustrates this, one big critique that I have of this debate is they asked on both nights a question about the candidates' feelings about a certain provision of the law that would criminalize under criminal law the moving across the border, right? Like this is a nuanced legal debate. This is not telling us, the audience, what is your view on immigration or immigration reform, right? That needs to be the question. As you stated, like RJ is stating that he has some concerns that maybe things could get worse in the future. And you asked him, well, it seems like these candidates would make things better in the future. But like we don't know what their perspective is because they didn't ask that question, right? So what we saw was a rehashing from the first debate where like Castro kind of got Beto over kind of a nuanced legal argument, made him look bad. And they were wanting to like bring that up to cause controversy. And like we as the audience, we don't like perceive anything off this, right? This is kind of a nuanced legal debate where like reasonable opinions can differ. And like this doesn't mean anything, right? We don't know what they like or what they support. So that's just kind of a critique of the debate format. Hopefully we'll see more in the future and just kind of a more open-ended question of what's your platform.
I actually thought that Buttigieg did a good job of answering that question, saying that I'm not going to get into the nuances of criminal law versus civil law on that, which I think you're
Yeah, he
more or less
handled that one well. I think the better performing candidates kind of called out how certain questions in both nights, the way they're phrased doesn't really get at the heart of where the candidates stand. It's trying to force them into some kind of bottleneck to make that statement that will be the soundbite. They were saying before about like, well, if somebody makes 10,000 more, does that mean they're going to pay more in taxes? And then Bernie Sanders says, yeah, they're going to pay more in taxes. Oh, see, look, Bernie Sanders wants you to pay more in taxes. Like, it's that kind of shit. And the criminalization question seemed like another one. It was all about the trees and no forest. But yeah, I agree that wasn't all that well done. Let's get back to Biden and Kamala and Tulsi, because I really want to talk about them, because that was the fire of night two, I think. I think, first of all, Biden got his ass kicked by everybody, also including Cory Booker. And he got his little dunk on thing with the, you're dipping in the Kool-Aid and you don't even know what flavor kind of thing, and wanting to compare records. Like people, I mean, they riffed off of him all night long. Like Biden, he got his ass whipped, and yet he still came out pretty high in the polls after that. He's still doing well. Like he basically survived, round two. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Biden is living off of name recognition right now.
Yep.
And I think that it's really difficult to take someone down who has the name recognition of a former vice president of an incredibly popular president, obviously in his same party, because
Yeah.
This
it's
is
He
the
only,
Democratic
he
Party.
only
Not the
says
1700s.
Obama like 50 times every time he talks. So,
right.
yeah.
But I mean, you can't take him down right now because there's 20 plus people in the race.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. What's going to hurt him is when they get down to a reasonable number of candidates and he has to start taking positions because he just looks lost. I mean,
You don't
he
find-
looks lost.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
You don't find that it's basically like death by 1,000 cuts, though. I mean, I feel like
I agree.
They're just stabbing at him, and he's basically going to bleed out. And even if he survives the debates, and goes against Trump, there's going to be a mountain of ammunition against him.
No, you're right. What's happening right now is there was an episode of the new Sherlock where a military officer gets stabbed through a tight band and is going to bleed to death in like several hours. That's what's happening to Biden, okay? Until we get down to a reasonable number of candidates, he's not going to start seeing the pain in the polls. Because when you go ask randos on the street who they might vote for, Biden is at the tip of their tongue. Like, everyone knows who Joe Biden is. But I don't think he has any staying power here. I agree with you, Drew. I think that he's already dying from those 1,000 cuts.
That and he's already wearing like mortuary makeup on his
yeah,
face. I mean,
totally.
it's so heavily caked on there, and he looks like he's half dead under there. It's
Well, that's something that, like, I don't know, that was in a way bothering me a little bit. I'd like to think I'm not an ageist. Bernie is, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years, like I think maybe 4. I think Biden's 73 and Bernie's 78, 79.
Bernie is 143 years old.
But he does
Bernie's a
not
lich.
seem like it. Like, he's still, like, I don't have any
Biden
sort
doesn't?
of question. Well, I just don't have any sort of, like, seeing him, like, his age doesn't hit me on, like,
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just see it when you see it all caked on there, and you see behind. You know, if they get a shot of like near the back of his head, you see all this like this really really pale, frail looking man behind.
I don't care about appearances. I
No,
care
I
about their mind, and I'm saying that Bernie still seems extremely sharp. And
Oh, yeah.
Biden, like, what did he close with? Like, Biden 30.
He had like a
300,
stroke.
30?
Yeah, he came out with some wrong address, and it looked like he was trying to read it off a teleprompter incorrectly. It was.
By the way, some guy capitalized on that and bought the URL for Biden's mishap and has been raising money for Buttigieg.
That's hilarious. I was gonna say though to your point, Haley, and your point, Drew, the difference between Biden and Bernie, even though they're both extremely ancient people, by our standards as younger people, like Bernie's still this fire. He's still an independent. He's just running as a Democrat, and he is a firebrand, and he's very passionate about his ideology, and the difference between him and Biden is Biden is like establishment corpse puppetry, that he is
Sure.
just being like dangled around saying establishment stuff. And because
Biden is biding his time.
exactly, he's trying to survive this stuff. He's trying to Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope, through this through this rumble in the jungle, like and just take the punches and keep moving out of the way as much as he possibly can. But he's not doing well. We're in round 2, and he's gotten tuned up badly. And I think that has a lot. It has everything to do with his record, because his record is not fucking flattering at all. And like
He's still leading.
Yeah, but Haley, he's going to be leading. He's leading in
he's going to be leading.
name recognition.
He's going to be leading right now. The problem with Biden. It's actually a similar problem that Bernie has, is that their name recognition is saturated completely. Like, there's nobody else going to learn about either of these people for the first time and be impressed and wowed, right? Everyone already
And that's
knows
a really good point. Yeah, it's a great point.
that
Where's his
floor and their
growth?
ceiling is
Where's his
narrow.
growth?
There's
Exactly.
not a lot of growth. And what's going to happen as these candidates fall off, and a lot of them really need to, and the support starts to coalesce around other people, he could very well lose his lead. I don't know if that's necessarily what's going to happen, but he could very well lose his lead. It's been demonstrated in argument in these debates, I think, that he kind of deserves to see that happen. Whether or not that happens, I don't know, because people, he's still the comfortable vote. He's still the guy who was buddies with Obama. He's the Uncle Joe memes that are hilarious. Like, he's still got all of that makes him, heartwarming to people who don't really dig into his past. But I think it was really the most. I mean, there's the busing thing and the fact that he worked with segregationists and all that stuff. Shit that's ugly in his record. The fact that he stood by during the Obama administration while they deported 3 million people during the Obama administration. And actually, in the early part of the debate, in his opening statements, he was interrupted by people like chanting in the audience something to the effect about 3 million deported. I couldn't make it out quite clear, and I just kind of heard from punditry afterwards that that's actually what they were saying. That, he's got all of his skeletons in the closet, and they are all being pulled out right now and just tossed on the ground. And I think, honestly, though, the worst of all of it to me in that debate, and I think it was Klobuchar, when she challenged him on some op-ed he wrote about women working being like something like the destruction of the family unit or something like that. So some right-wingy conservative kind of sentiment about like women should stay at home kind of thing. Even though his own personal life doesn't reflect that, even though he does not voice any support for that, like he still said it, and she just kept coming back and cornering him on it, and he never had a good answer. I think at the very end he said something to the effect of, "I didn't mean it." Like,
that was Gillibrand.
Yeah, it was Gillibrand.
Yeah.
Oh, I said Klobuchar. I'm sorry, Gillibrand. Kristen Gillibrand. My mistake. There's 20 candidates, guys. Sorry. Anyway.
So I gotta run down our thoughts on Biden real quick. So as we're pointing out, like, he's got a long career, right? So he's got decades of history, and some of it has not aged well. I think he's doing a poor job of not saying I've grown and changed my position on that. Mm-hmm. He doesn't answer it, or he just makes excuses for it. And like he can show like personal growth, and he just doesn't.
And that was the question I had, was when did he actually say those comments? Were they like sometime in the 80s or, I don't know, 70s or whatever it was? Or are we talking like something more recent, like 5-10 years ago?
So I actually don't think the timing matters. I think that everyone as an individual is going to have a past. But what I think Doug is touching on, like, I don't care, if you've made mistakes, you've made mistakes. We're all human and everything. But, like, what is an issue is not addressing it, not knowing, like, okay, if you have an issue in your past, like, be aware that someone's going to touch on it. Have a response to it. It's not your past may or may not define you, depending on how you react to it. That's
right. So particularly with like Booker's criticism of his tough on crime talk and his support of crime bills in the past, like he should just say what his platform is now and what he supports. Instead, what he's doing, second point here, is that I think he's riding Obama's coattails, right? He's cashing in on the goodwill of what Obama did, and he's not stating affirmatively what his platform is. Now, he does have a platform, right? But he's not articulating what it is. And the less he focuses on what the future will be with him, the more he's going to have to try and defend the past of what he did and any criticisms people might have of the Obama administration. So, like, his messaging just needs to transform to talk about what he will do.
Yeah. He's got to give some kind of answer to these things and then pivot effectively. And he just keeps getting caught flat-footed every time. Because the answer isn't effective, and he just gets stopped at the pivot. every time, saying,
Yeah,
"Oh, you're
and-
saying all this and that," but you didn't answer my question. You didn't answer my fucking question, dude. Like,
Right.
that was
And that's
all
what's
night.
shocking, though. That's
Yeah.
what's shocking. How is he being caught flat-footed by these things? I mean,
Yeah.
because he was never that good. The guy who's supposed to, decades, in
How many times has he like tried to get the nom?
this
Three?
this is the
time.
fourth. This is the fourth.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so,
Well-
the third point I want to make
Go
is
ahead.
I think the optics of this make him look weak, and that is not what you want on a national stage up against Donald Trump, right? So we've seen him be unable to answer questions well or at all, and we've also seen him consistently end his speech when they ask him to or before time is called, right? We're not seeing an assertiveness; we're seeing a submissiveness, and like Donald Trump's just going to eat you up. And people who might be on the fence are going to see that, right? So like this is why people like Donald Trump. And so like if someone's just going to back down or play coy, like this is really bad. Like you're going to have a hard time like
And that's
challenging him.
absolutely. And I want to go from that to actually. I know a lot of people probably here are not huge fans of Kamala Harris because of her history as a prosecutor and some of the sort of stupid and cruel things that she let go down under her watch. She's spot on when she talks about Trump, though. And if I'm imagining in my mind somebody can go toe to toe with Trump and kick his ass, like I think she's probably the strongest contender for that. The way she talks about him as a predator, that she can sense weakness, or that he can sense weakness, and it's to your point, Doug, that like Trump will see all kinds of weakness out of Biden after these two performances. That he's a doddering old guy who just gives the party line platitudes, and he keeps getting beat up. He can't defend himself, and he'll be talking, and he'll kind of trip over his words a little bit, and then decide that he doesn't need to bother finishing that statement. He's like, anyway, kind of thing. Like he did that a couple of times, and I was like, you don't do that on this stage. Like you don't do that. But he just did several times, and it just seemed like maybe his expectations of what running for president in 2020 was going to look like, that he was going to face serious contenders rather than just walk right into a nomination, a la Hillary Clinton. Maybe that was his expectation, and his reality is bearing out quite differently.
It shows he's
arrogance.
Yes.
it shows he's polite and kind of being a kind person, I think. And like you will not win against Donald Trump if you are polite.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah, it's well
Kamala
put.
Harris, at least on a debate stage, will kick the absolute shit out of Donald Trump.
But the thing is, so would Hillary.
She did okay. She didn't do badly, but I don't think anyone will go after Trump as viciously and incisively as I think Harris could. I just get that vibe from her. Like she will draw blood.
I've been consistently unimpressed with her.
Really? Okay.
I'm with Drew.
Okay. And I'm not saying
I would not.
I'm
I
saying
would
she deserves to be
personally
president
not
or the
want to be
nomination.
prosecuted.
I'm just saying her going after Trump, I think, would be.
She's incredibly underwhelming. She doesn't speak that well. She just sort of comes across as somewhat disinterested, but very interested in herself. It's just, I don't know. There's something about it that I don't see very legitimate.
And
The
she
way
had-
that I would describe it is that she speaks in vectors. So Kamala Harris is a strong advocate, right? Obviously, her background shows that. But she has a way of approaching issues which appears to be, I understand this in the way that I have pre-booked it. And when I am thrown off of that, she just falters. I mean, that happened in the first debate. It happened in the second debate. And I don't think that she looks all that strong as someone who is able to, and maybe this isn't a very valuable skill, but take information and sort of process it and then analyze it and say, okay, here's what that means now. You throw off her talking points, and she looks lost. It's happened several times in the first
Exactly.
debate.
Exactly.
I think Tulsi nailed her ass to the wall. I will definitely give Tulsi that. And that's a good point about Harris too. That it's like she's kind of a glass cannon, right? That she can, or at least to me, that's how I see her. Is that she can go hard on somebody, but she doesn't handle it that well because she also has a not stellar history.
And that's sort of what's surprising is that for somebody who's a former prosecutor, you should theoretically be able to handle aggression
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, you would think.
Right, because that's what you deal with every single day.
Right, exactly. You should be able to be aggressive and take aggression. And she seems to be aggressive, but doesn't seem to be able to handle the immediate aggressive act against her, which is very odd. Very odd.
Haley, what do you think?
I hear what y'all are saying. I'm sort of unimpressed by the aggression tactics that have played out, particularly in the second round of the debate. And one of the things that I thought should have been, a little bit more focused on is beating Donald Trump. And so personally, I would never want to be cross-examined by Kamala Harris, but that's neither here nor there.
But yeah, go ahead.
When it actually comes to beating Trump, I am not sure if that sort of matching aggression, matching that sort of attitude is what's going to be the most powerful. Because what I think really resonated about Trump is this sort of flippant attitude about the question asked, and how he then flipped it was to then go on this aggressive tactic. And I wonder if, we know what that tactic is going to be now. So matching that kind of aggression, going that route, I feel like that's potentially fueling a fire. And, I wonder if is sort of a flippant attitude back. Like, I don't care if you're going to say, if you're going to call me Sleepy Joe, or you're going to say I look like the dude from the Mad Men article. The question was this, and here's this. I wonder if that's going to resonate better than matching an aggressive tit for tat.
No,
so,
and I hear you, Haley. I just think that Harris isn't able to do either of those things.
I don't. She's not my candidate of choice or anything, but and so I think that if she did win the nom, one of the things that I would be concerned about is I think that she would feed into, not addressing her bad record and then going on an aggressive tactic with Trump that he would just be able to feed and fuel. So I hope she doesn't get it, because I don't think that she can beat him.
Can we talk really quickly about De Blasio?
Oh,
yeah.
And his random outburst.
Did Doug have anything to say?
I'm sorry.
I saw him unmute himself.
Sure. Let me just pop in for a minute. So, one thing about Harris is from the first set of debates, her message seemed to be middle class tax cuts, and we heard nothing about that, right? So we don't hear what her message is. It's going to be this fine line that people have to walk of criticizing Trump and also speaking to what values and platforms that they want to advance to get people to vote for them, right? Because at the end of the day, your goal is to get more votes, and so we don't know empirically what will be more effective. But I think if you remove a lot of the conversation about what you can bring to people, you're going to have a really hard time winning. So I think. Again, so I know what some of the candidates are about from the way they're talking in these debates. I don't know what she's about after the second debate.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a fair point. I mean, other than me being convinced that she would be rhetorically effective against Trump, and as the candidate will say, I'm going to come out here and fuck you up, Donald Trump. like I don't really know what else to say about it, honestly. And again, I'm getting pushback, which I respect. That she could even do that all that well. So I mean, yeah, and she's not necessarily she's not my candidate of choice either. I'm still not sure if I have one. Maybe Warren, if I'm being honest.
And the shame. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's fine. But I did want to go on because you wanted to talk about De Blasio.
Just really briefly, I thought it was entertaining. Do all these people have like earpieces in that are talking with their staff? Do we know if that's the case or not?
You mean like while
they're talking with their own campaign people, like when they're
whenever they're on the stage? No.
Okay, because it sort of to me was like it screamed of when they were ending their conversation and they had De Blasio just like run on and start talking about Iran. It was like somebody was screaming into his like earpiece, get out there to actually talk to somebody, do something. You've been doing nothing. You haven't even said anything. Like it just reeked of it just reeked of not being getting his time.
I don't know if that's like an earpiece thing, but I get the sense that when a lot of these candidates prep, that when they're asked a certain question, it's like Yang turns everything back to the universal basic income thing, like turns every topic back into that, like just ham-fistedly, right? So like, but he's been coached on that.
I just found it really entertaining.
I'd imagine De Blasio was coached on. I can't remember the specific question, but to make sure that it had to do with the Iran nuclear deal, and then it was like they got like segued onto the Iraq war, and that was a mistake, and who was for it and who was against it, and what's everyone's record and stuff like that.
And yeah, like, I mean the conversation
was Iran because he had something prepared to talk about Iran. And
right, the conversation was like way far past that at that point. It was kind of entertaining to me, just like running out there screaming.
Two points. One, into the debate, so time is running out. Two, anytime you're preparing an argument, like in court, or if you're like taking a deposition or something, surely you have like a piece of paper that has a bullet points of like, I have to hit A, B, and C. And if time's running out and you haven't hit C, you got to hit it.
Honestly, I can sympathize because, like, even just doing like this show or the podcast, like, if there's points I'm trying to get to and like the conversation has moved on, I was like, I still need it. Like, this is already in the show notes, or this is something that was important to cover. Like, I've got to bring this back up somehow, and I got to fit it in somehow. Sometimes I do okay with that, sometimes I don't. But when you're dealing with a lot of personalities, especially say something like this. And the conversation goes on, like like Haley, like your personal story about your husband and immigration, and RJ, your concerns and stuff like that. It's like, oh, but we got to say this other stuff about candidate XYZ and that dumbass thing they said and how they got caught out for it. Like, so I've got to find a way to just jump in there. Like, I see why they do it. Like, I get it. It doesn't always play well, but I see why they're doing it.
And also, like, keep in mind, we were talking about the deportation chants during Biden. One of the, whenever Booker was giving his opening statements, there was a lot of chants that were going on, and the chants weren't for Booker. It was for de Blasio to fire the police officer that killed Gray. His last name's Gray, Michael Gray. That was the guy who was killed. I can't breathe. The police officer,
Eric Gardner, right?
Gardner. That's what it is. Yeah. The police officer's last name is something with a P, like Platanio, something like that.
Yeah.
And what they were chanting were "Fire Platanio" or whatever his name is.
Yeah. Insofar that De Blasio was involved in that debate at all, it was mostly to get his own ass kicked. On that topic, because all those other candidates came out and said, I would have fired him immediately. It was Kristen Gillibrand and I think Harris and I can't remember who else came out and said, yeah, he should be fired. And then we should go further if local government isn't doing enough on that one.
Something that I appreciated about certain candidates just reminded me of Gillibrand in particular. She was posed a question like, "Would you have fired him? Like, what would you have done?" In general, in these debates, and I understand that like they need to hold their ground. They need to not commit to these right-wing questions or anything like that. and of course there's a way to respond, but when you're asked certain questions, I really personally dislike the complete resistance to straight up answer anything every time. So
Yeah,
and I think that's
over.
different. Like whenever there's some those more layered questions, like would it raise taxes, and you're just like, well, you're kind of missing the point or something. Versus like, what would you have done in this very specific circumstance? And that's just a personal frustration of mine. That's a vent. I'll get off the soapbox.
No, it's fine.
Sorry.
I think that carries over from the first round as well. Of people just not answering the fucking question, especially when is relevant and to the point, versus this. We're trying to to sort of hedge you in to get you to say the certain thing for the soundbite. Like you can answer something in a way that's substantive and not dodge either, right? You still give the full context. Like you can do that, and a lot of them fail to do that. Hell, even first, I don't want to go back too much into first round. First round, like Bernie failed to do that. I can't remember how many times. I was there watching the TV, just yelling. I'm like, answer the fucking question. Like. You're not answering the question. It's really obvious. The amount of pivoting that's been going on here has been discouraging, I think, overall.
Yeah,
and that
I would say that with Bernie particularly, like the first round, I was actually quite turned off on him as a candidate, but with the second round, I don't know if you talked to his coach, it wasn't. There's something about following the rules to a certain extent that I just think you should do.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fine line there. There's a point where you need to call out, irrelevance or the fact that you're, creating the wrong narrative even by phrasing a question a certain way, and without avoiding addressing the issue, and that that is a very fine line sometimes, and some of them do it better than others. But anyway,
to underscore Haley's point, Wapo said that Daniel Pantaleo was one of the losers of night 2.
Yeah,
that's how bad it went for De Blasio.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, nobody it is just from what I understand. He's just not well liked in general. Whether or not he has okay talking points, I think his closing speech was pretty funny, and in that way it was catchy. His website's tax the hell, tax the hell out of the rich people. Just come right out, tax the hell out of the rich people. That has some punch to it, right? He's not going to be the nominee. He's not. But that was a good moment for him. So.
Oh sure.
Yeah, that was the one good moment he had.
It was pretty much his only good moment. What do you guys think? Because no one said anything about it. I think it's Jay Inslee.
Oh, he's
thoughts about him.
I think
other than the fact that I'm surprised
he's
that
great.
Boomer is all about dealing with climate change.
Really, he's BFFs with DiCaprio.
Well, RJ pointed out that he knows how to say primer versus primer.
Yeah, that is literally that's it. That's it for him. From my perspective.
I mean, so
he did it.
Question, I think that the debates this round and last round have been particularly centered around healthcare, number one by far, and then to a lesser extent immigration. But what are the big issues for everyone?
So for us personally, or are you asking generally to the general public?
I want to know personally first.
Who wants to start?
Yeah, I'll go first. Why not? So I think climate change is the biggest one, right?
Yeah.
So this will take a Herculean effort over decades, and the time to start was probably decades ago. Mm-hmm. So I honestly he is not charismatic, but he has a clear message. He has a big priority. He wants to address it, and he genuinely seems like a nice person. He's just not charismatic enough, and he just makes everything he says sounds like a really great pitch for living in Washington.
Yeah.
But so for me, climate change is probably number one because this might be an existential threat, particularly if you live in areas that are vulnerable. It also has a big threat to people in other parts of the world, and it also requires coordination with other places in the world too. So this is probably number one, and I think number two for me is probably electoral reform, which Pete should spend more time talking about. He talks about it a little bit, but you don't hear too much about it. I think Gillibrand talked about it a little bit too. So that's probably like my number one and two. Healthcare, I think polling wise, matters a lot for the general public because it's a big cost that individuals face. I have really good health insurance through my employer, so it's not that big of an issue to me personally if I'm being selfish. So it's lower down for me. So probably number one is like climate change. Number two is like electoral reform and electoral security.
Yeah. For me, climate change would be number one. Number two would probably, be on the line of family workplace reform, sort of getting on that of like parental leave, standard vacation, taking better care of people in general. Healthcare personally is lower for me because I do have great healthcare through my employer. But I do understand how that's a higher thing for other people. And I also think that the reason why climate change is my number one is probably because of that, in that I see this existential threat, and I see that it's real, but like I'm not personally facing any sort of like challenges to make ends meet and live my daily life, and not facing that kind of threat personally. Whereas I do understand that a good majority of people are. So.
Also, Yang said it's already too late, and if you live on the coast, you need to move to high ground.
He did.
Oh my
that.
God! I thought
so
that was. I didn't like that.
He said it so deadpan too. Like it's just completely matter of fact. I'm just data reciting things right now. Like he just told people to move to higher ground. Like.
New Orleans gone.
Okay.
It's gone.
Well, hey, at least I'll have beachfront property, right?
Hell yeah, Murfreesboro is going to be beautiful beachfront property. I'm hoping. So. Landlocked state surrounded by 9 other states. So.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, but we need someone pushing that line, right?
Yeah, it's.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's been taken quite as seriously because of the crunchy granola sort of people that have been pushing it for so long.
Yeah, it's not taken seriously. Right.
And it is now becoming at least quite apparent to me just the magnitude and actual threat that it's going to have on us long term. Whether or not we can do something about it is, to me, quite honestly, I don't know if we can. But, and this is one interesting takeaway that I had, and I think I talked to Haley and RJ about this at one point. The one thing that Gillibrand had mentioned was talking about climate change issues in the sense of like treating it like say, for instance, the Apollo program. And I thought that was a very interesting and quite honestly somewhat exciting way of couching it.
We all thought of terrible phrases to equate it with the space race.
Yeah,
that's a good phrase. I couldn't think
like
of one,
climate wars or war on climate or
inscrutable renewables was mine.
Yeah,
I had some bad
that's too
ones.
like high level. It's too high tier.
Too many syllables.
Yeah, it's not going to resonate with Joe Q Farmer or something. You know.
I did think that was an interesting insight, though. That like the idea of the space race with Russia versus like a climate race, which
right. Well, I mean, it gives us
push more.
It gives us an opportunity to take the lead on something and develop technology to combat it that will put us in a much more powerful position. I mean, it could create new jobs. It could do all sorts of security things for people, and I think that's something that maybe gets lost in what it actually does.
And we just had the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and everyone does have a sense of pride in that. Yeah. And I think that it's like something that.
Sorry, I had to interject that. was
I
my
didn't
What was
brother's
that?
birthday was also the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, so I thought that was cool. Everyone's
Well-
like,
Join
okay.
back.
Anyway, hey, welcome back, Doug. I was about to let everyone know that Doug hit a thunderstorm came by Doug's and knocked out his internet, but he's back.
Hey, Doug, if you think of any good phrases to equate the climate race with space race, let us know.
Well,
By the way,
go ahead, Haley.
No, you can go.
Well, my thought was that if you could package and brand it appropriately, you'd make it more palatable to the more angry right type people.
The mouth breather class.
Well, I don't know if I would put it quite like that, but yeah.
That's the way that it should be put.
We're all about building bridges over here.
RJ is about burning
A
bridges and
palatable
having them light the
political
way.
ferment.
This is a palatable political ferment.
Yeah, it is. It is palatable for everybody, but the people that were just crushing under our boots.
RJ, I love you, man. You remind me of me when I stopped trying to be nice to people.
Wow.
But Drew, Doug, is that a Tyler Arnold painting? The rabbit.
It's a rabbit painting from Wayfair. We have two bunnies. So this is, hang on, I'll show you. This is our second bedroom, which is, we have a pen that takes up most of the room, and we have two rabbits.
Oh.
You have a bunny paradise.
And
All
we
right,
have a
whoa. Do you own or rent?
we have a condo.
Oh, that's fine. It's a horizontal property act thing. It's great.
Gotcha. Anyway, so we were kind of going through talking about like what's your biggest issue. I don't know who didn't get a chance to speak their mind yet, but I wanted everyone to be able to say their piece.
Well, I guess
Anybody not get to
I
go,
didn't,
or-
and I don't think RJ did.
Well, Drew,
So go
what's
ahead,
your-
RJ.
Okay, well, RJ, you go ahead. What's your biggest issue?
Oh, I would go with electoral reform above climate change. I agree climate change is a bigger deal, but without electoral reform, we're not going to be able to do anything about it. I don't know that electoral reform would actually change things that much because no one knows. But if we were to make it so that individual voters had the maximum amount of power through their voice at the ballot box, I think that achieves a lot of what we talk about when we say, the American ideal. I also think that it would make it easier to get to my second point, which would be climate change. I mean, we're all going to die, so we should probably do something about the fact that we have an existential threat that supposedly we can still do something about. Those are my top two. Drew?
Oh, Drew, go ahead.
I mean, I guess the answer for me would be climate change. The other would be possibly jobs/economy, but that might in part be affected by the first topic. I mean, there's not much to say that hasn't been already said, at least about the first point. Also, a big thing for me would be immigration. I'm pretty centrist on a lot of topics, but for immigration, I think that borders and border protection and all that other nonsense it really only serves to hurt a lot of people. I don't know. I have a cousin that's from Honduras, and he came all the way on the caravan. We're talking 20 years ago, up from Honduras all the way through Mexico, made it across the border, nearly died from a fever before he was found at a detention center by my cousins, and they adopted him, and he became an American citizen, and then eventually became a police officer for Charlotte. But he knows a lot more of the specific, I guess, concerns associated with immigration reform. But it is a concern of mine. I think that again, until that point, until I met him, I don't think I had a good impression of just the kind of mess that it is. But that's, I mean, other people have said it more eloquently than me. But that's really it.
I guess if I could throw my own 2 cents in here, I think what sort of undergirds all of these issues, which is why I can't necessarily. I mean, I'm tempted to pick, immigration reform. I'm tempted to pick climate change because these are huge, huge issues, catastrophic, and they reach into a lot of other things. But the underlying problem is that and it's been just exacerbated so badly by this administration, is that we no longer value competency over ideology. In appointing people who are supposed to run these things effectively, in whatever agency, in the judiciary, in every facet of governance, that we just have ideologues, and if we don't start caring more about being able to do the shit you're supposed to do effectively, and to know what the hell you're talking about, like, none of this is going to change. None of this is going to get better. So long as we can have people who are, who loud climate change deniers, in charge of the EPA, and people who hate brown people, running immigration policy, like, none of this shit's going to get better. Like, we have to have people who are not just, ideological blowhards. In government, like that's the underlying issue, and that's I guess multifaceted, but that's the most important thing to me, as a voter, of seeing a return to basic sanity, I guess I would call it, but that's my position anyway. Moving on from that, because I think it's getting pretty late and we're going to want to close out. Let's do real quickly. I won't say who did the worst, because that could go on for an hour. Who do we think came out the strongest between these 2 nights, and what do we want to see for round 3? And I'll just go down the line. Doug?
Yeah, I think Warren performed the strongest. I want to see more people talk about their platforms and what they can bring to the country.
Cool. Drew?
I didn't see day 2, so I can't really say anything about that. As to day 2, did I say day 1? I didn't say.
You say you didn't see day 2.
I didn't say day 1. I saw day 2.
Okay.
Day 2. Good question. I don't feel like anybody was particularly strong. It was more like who didn't get murdered or stabbed the most. Honestly, I have no real opinion on who did better. I guess Biden didn't die despite getting torched by everybody, so I mean, I suppose that's good for him. Tulsi Gabbard didn't do bad. I thought she had some pretty interesting points. I don't think it's her time, and I don't think she's ready for this part of the stage yet. We had Mr. Mackey, who was, just goofy. Yeah. Then we had, Karen talking about all her Karens. And then you had Kamala Harris, who was up there, who didn't look interested and looked half drunk. I don't know. I was not impressed by any of them, really. No, I mean, yeah, that's all I can say.
Okay. And what would you like to see in terms of, like, a change of format, a change of
the format was garbage. Did you? I mean, they asked a question that was like, basically, here, take a pot shot at Biden,
Yeah.
I was, I was like,
no,
are
I
you
get it. Yeah,
kidding me?
the staging of the questions.
What I would
is
like
I'm
to see
calling
is
it.
more bloodshed. That's really what I
Okay,
want. I want to
okay.
see. I want to see more of them
Okay.
get called and just drop.
Okay.
That's what I want to see.
That's what you want to see. All right, Haley.
I think that in any of these debates, it's always going to be Warren's debate to lose, not to win, and she hasn't lost yet. And so I think that she's coming with a high standard and she's doing well. I actually was very surprised by Castro. So that's someone who I think that out of some of the second tier people really just sort of put something out there that I thought was both succinct, interesting, and on message. What I'd like to see more is I'd like to see less punditry. I'd appreciate it if we're in a two-party system, and I understand that it's a competition pool, but I wanna know more about what these individual people want to do and how they think they're going to win versus who can get the best soundbite in and jab. So I would just whenever I say less punditry, that's probably more targeted at the moderators than the actual candidates. But that is something that I would like to see. I'd like to get to know more about the candidates. I can read about them all I want. I'd like to hear from them. So that's it.
Cool. RJ.
Shout out to Doug. Liliana, heretical healer. Yes. Identified. That was impressive. That was a PM, by the way. But I just can't believe he picked up on that. He was like, "Oh, hey, nice Liliana print," which you could see a quarter of over there.
Fantastic.
That is impressive. That is quite impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy. So
We bring the best people on FO.
oh yeah. Only the best.
People tell me. People always tell me.
Put up the mug.
Yeah.
What,
Where's
this
the
one?
mug?
What? Where is the mug? I think Warren, she's the comet here. Like, she is the ascendancy. Biden really needs to kind of like hone in on whatever it is that he thinks he's trying to say. Because when we get to September and we cut down on the number of people that are in this race, Biden's name recognition is not going to carry him anymore. I think Warren has been the winner of both debates easily. I think Sanders is probably second, simply because he's maintained his name recognition without like denigrating himself, which I would say Biden has done. Biden might be number one right now, but I don't see that continuing.
Fair. And in terms of like sort of a change in format or structure or what have you for the next round, what would be your hopes for a better third round?
Oh, my hope is that the third round involves serious candidates with honest beliefs and substantive thoughts that they can actually bounce off one another for more than 15 or 30 seconds.
I was going to say, so Warren's going to do a stump speech. So
yeah, no. But she's going to do a stump speech, but her stump speech is going to be based on something that actually works.
Sure.
Like, we've had this debate, I just thought, did not advance the ball very much.
No, it was a lot of bloodletting. I think this round. I think that was the biggest problem with it is that, you know, we keep hearing, sort of the Obama quote about the circular firing squad and liberals eat their own and yada yada yada, and like everybody, really even in the center or right, is just going to feed into that. Watch such and such tear down such and such, and we've been here talking about it. We're just kind of given like the play by play, like we would just watch a sporting event, right? And that's kind of how I'm looking at this. Like I don't have a particular dog in this fight that I'm really gunning for someone to come out, the strongest and best. Um, right now, I am leaning Warren as doing the best in all of this. That she seems there's no real serious criticism of her from what I've seen, or nothing, nothing damning anyway. Uh, she seems to hold herself well. She seems presidential, which is I think a big part of it. We all miss that Obama-ness, right? Of leaders when they speak. I think she has a little bit of that. I think Pete has a little bit of that too, which is why he's so popular. But I don't think Pete, he did okay in this one, but he didn't really stand out. So that's sort of where I was at with that one. But like, yeah, I'd say overall, I got to give it to Warren. Other people made really good points that I think they'll be effective thought leaders, maybe, cabinet positions, positions in the administration, their own notoriety for future races. Like Beto, maybe he needs to go back and get rid of Ted Cruz. That would be fantastic to see. But these guys aren't going to be president. So I want to see a much smaller field, honestly. And I know there's rules about how that's supposed to go in terms of, fundraising dollars and the number of donors and things like that. But like, it needs to be a smaller field. It needs to be a more focused conversation, because the biggest problem to me is that the message coming from, the Democratic Party as a whole for the nominee they're going to pick is confused. It's going in different directions based on, which candidate we're talking about, and the mixed signals isn't going to give anybody confidence in what's going to come out of this thing at the end, and that would cause trepidation, I think, and cause people to not be excited about what's going on because they don't know what's going to happen. There's a good, in my mind anyway, there's a lot of uncertainty because you have like this more progressive element and then this more like centrist kind of thing, establishment kind of thing, and they're at odds with each other, almost as much as they're at odds with the right, with Trump, and that's dangerous. And I think at least by the end of this next round of debates, that we know what we as in everyone who's anti-Trump, we know what we want to say to the American people, and that we have a clear voice and a clear message. And if we don't do that, like we don't get that shit right soon, like it is going to be 4 more years of Trump, I think. And so that's what I want to see to come out of the next round anyway. So that's my 2 cents. I included in the show notes, it is late, I included in the show notes something about the Mueller testimony. I think it's probably not a good time to get into all that. Maybe we can revisit that. It was interesting that it was touched on a little bit during the debates. And I know Harris is not super popular in this group, but I think she made really good points about it. And I think it was Mayor Pete as well, talking about how we've made all this noise about Donald Trump and what he did in obstruction of justice, and when it came down to it, we didn't do anything. And he's going to use that to carry forward the narrative of total exoneration, witch hunt, which I think will be damning in once the primaries close, and it's going to be the contest between whoever our nominee is and Donald Trump. That will be his talking point. And so I'll reiterate my own point again. He did obstruct justice. There's 10 counts of it, 3 of which meet all 3 elements. Arguably, there's 4 counts of that. And if we don't impeach him after the primaries, to tie up his resources and just the pure political calculation, but it's also right that we should do it. if we don't do it, I think it's going to hurt us in the long run, and I don't think it would hurt us if we did. So please, House of Representatives, grow a fucking spine. So that's my 2 cents about that. Any quick thoughts about that? Who did I
Hey,
lose? I lost Haley.
real quick on that. So I saw on Twitter that the number of Democrats is one shy of a majority of House Democrats have come out in support of impeachment as of today.
Nice.
So, and it was I think it was Castro who pointed it out, and I'm in agreement with it.
Cool. Somebody else, Drew.
I have no comment.
You have no comment on the Mueller testimony and impeachment?
Yeah, pretty much no comment.
Okay. All right, RJ.
Yeah, I agree with Doug. I think it's very difficult at this point in time, with what we know, not to at least open an impeachment inquiry in the House Judiciary. I don't see a cause to stand here and say, well, we have congressional subpoenas, and those have some force, absolutely under the law. You open an inquiry, and you have the full force. The Supreme Court has already determined this. To talk to whoever you want, to make them answer pretty much whatever you want that isn't actually objectionable. And I think the Democrats are playing a little scared by not opening the inquiry in the House Judiciary Committee and saying, we're going to take you to the mat on this. And I don't think it matters that much to where we are in the nomination process, because Trump is probably guilty of obstruction, and getting that out in front of the American people is politically useful, but also sort of a duty of the Congress. So, regardless of the fact that I agree, you will never convict Donald Trump of treason or any impeachable.
Was that Pete or Booker who called out Moscow Mitch as being the one who we could say is the one responsible for letting him off the hook rather than us?
I don't think it was either of them.
Yeah,
I mean,
My memory's that bad. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No. I mean,
Again,
they
I
said it on
apologize when
they
it
said
came
it on
up.
night 2, but I don't recall it being either of them. You might be right though, but I don't recall him saying it would have been
feel like
Booker, and I don't remember him
I
saying.
feel like it was
Moscow
Booker, but
Mitch.
again, I could be wrong. But I remember that when that discussion came up of saying, like, it's going to look real bad on us if we've made this much noise for this amount of time, and we're right there. Mueller's given us everything. Someone with basic reading comprehension skills could discern. As these 10 counts of obstruction, like this, if you were ever going to impeach a president, this would be the time to do it. This would be the opportune moment, right? This is what it's for, and to not do it is just total weakness, and that would be exploited, I think, at easily it would be exploited.
It was Castro on both of them.
Was it Castro?
Yeah.
Good for him. No,
Yeah.
he did really well. And I just want to say there's a okay, and I know we got to end. But there's a small part of me that wants Castro to go all the way and then beat Trump just so that he can be told adios by a Latino. Like that little ending, like I know that's not a good reason to vote for somebody, but it's a fuck you vote, and I'm not above it. Like I mean, it's why we got Donald Trump. We got a giant fuck you vote from 36% of the country or whatever. Like, That's all that was. I mean, I'm not above doing it back. But anyway, so yeah. So, but about impeachment, I think I think he's absolutely right about that. Like this is the time to do it. This is what it's for. It's politically expedient. It'll be damaging if we don't, and history won't be kind to us if we don't do it either. And that's maybe more important than any of it. So, yeah, I think that was Booker's point, actually, that it's not about whether or not it's politically expedient, that it's essentially sort of our duty kind of thing. I think that was part of his point. A lot of them cross over each other. But anyway, so that's my thoughts on that. Is there anything else that we want to conclude here, or are we ready to wrap this thing up? Silence.
Seems good to me.
Did you get the sound effect? The dramatic music?
I heard no dramatic music.
Lame.
Were you playing it when your mic was muted?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I heard no dramatic music. I apologize for the lateness of that. It's late. I think it's after 10 here, after 11 for I think Poor Dog. Oh, there we go. That's
dramatic.
Beautiful.
Dramatic answer. Good.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we need to start. We need to start including some of those. But anyway, I'm gonna let it go. Thank you to Ross Janes at Janes Media. He is our digital wizard, makes all the bells and whistles work, including this and finagling the post YouTube on air Hangouts thing, because that's defunct now. But we worked around it, and so thank you. Please check us out at fermentingopinions.com. We on the web there. We have a Facebook page and group. Obviously, if you're looking at this on YouTube, smash that subscribe button. You can also find our podcast on iTunes, Beyond Pod, or wherever you get your podcast listening on. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Haley's already gone. But Doug, Drew, and RJ, it was cool chatting with you guys. Hope we can do this again soon. Yes, watch that. I'm going to put on the as we play out. Very good, very good. FO, we have merchandise now. Check it out on the website. All that said, I'm David Papiden, and James McVeigh is still canvassing for Michelle Williamson, and we will see you next time.